Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everybody. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 6th canto, 1st chapter, text number 68. This is the last text of the chapter. And since time is flying, I will just read the Sanskrit and the word for word and then get into the translation purport. Taenam dandapane sakasham kritakilbisham neshyamo kritanirvesham yatra dande na shudyati. Tata, therefore, enam, him, dandapane, of Yamaraj, who is authorized to punish, sakasham, in the presence, kritakilbisham, who has regularly committed all sinful activities, neshyamaha, we shall take, akritanirvesham, who has not undergone atonement, yatra, where, dandena, by punishment, shudyati, he will be purified. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This man Ajamil did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. Purport: the Vishnudutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take Ajamil to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was appropriate, since Ajamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts. He was to be taken to Yamaraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful, and therefore he also must be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamaraj is a process of purification for the most abominable sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamadutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking Ajamila to Yamaraj. Thus, and the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 1st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The History of the Life of Ajamila. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripadamaham vande Sri Guru Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that there's 3 books from Srimad Bhagavatam that should always be in print. It's 1st canto part 1, 2nd canto part 1, and 6th canto part 1. So this is 6th canto part 1 that we're studying here. And he mentioned that because the story of Ajamil is very instructive in many ways. So we're at the end of this chapter, and I hear you have discussed in details about the events that transpired. So we'll just sum it up and focus on a few essential points. Ajamil had engaged in all types of sinful activities, and at his point of death, he had called for his son. And then both the Vishnudutas and the Yamadutas appeared. So, and there was this discussion, this argument that he is witnessing. And it's an interesting scenario on many levels. First of all, have you ever been in a situation where 2 parties were arguing and you were kind of like the neutral observer? Has this ever happened to you? Okay, so rule number 1, keep your mouth shut and your ears open, okay? Just observe, don't take sides. Rule number 2, even if their arguments seem to be inconclusive, if we're actually focusing on the essence, we can always make out what are the takeaways, what are the lessons from this story. Just like here, some of the lessons are that if you commit sinful activities, there will be punishment. It's as simple and clear as that, because whatever we do has got a reaction. So Ajamil performed sinful activities, so he was due to suffer the result, the punishment for those sinful activities. And that's why danda, or is the stick, or punishment, is mentioned twice here in this verse. So the Yamadutas, they are very eager to perform their service and to get Ajamil to Yamaraj for his just punishment. But as we will hear in the next chapter, the Vishnudutas are pleading their case, and they're saying, no, he's not to be taken, because he has performed atonement unknowingly through the chanting of the holy name. Now, in this world, for any type of activity, there is some atonement, and it can be either in suffering or it can be in paying a fine. Time also does purify and alleviate certain offenses or wrongdoings. So, but in the Bhagavatam, this topic of atonement comes up in different instances. And Parikshit Maharaj is saying, when Shukadeva Goswami tests him about atonement, he's saying, isn't it like the bathing of an elephant? I don't know how many of you have experience of seeing an elephant, but you may have heard that an elephant goes and bathes very thoroughly, and then he gets out, and the first thing he does is he takes earth from the ground and he throws it all over his body. So you may ask yourself, what's the point in taking a bath if you throw dirt all over yourself? Now, of course, the elephant has got good reason, according to his logic, but that is the example that is being used, and how atonement is actually useless unless the mindset, the mentality of the person changes. We see people going to temple, mosque, and church and synagogue and going for atonement. You may have even done it yourself when you were going to some religious institution in the past. And then they confess, they give a donation, they may say some prayers and do some punya, some pious, some beneficial activity to counteract the negative effects of their wrongdoings. But everyone knows that right after that, people go back to the bar. People go back to doing all the same things that have been doing previously. So basically, it's a big waste of time. So here, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes about capital punishment, which is, of course, not a very popular topic nowadays, especially here in this country. People are very divided upon this topic, but it's not going to be today's topic of our class. So I leave that for you to figure out in some other occasion. I'm sure, did you discuss capital punishment so far?
No.
Not really? So basically the point is being made that if a person is not completing his atonement, then in future lives they will have to suffer for their wrongdoings. So it is in their benefit to actually get that punishment and then move on with a clean slate, so to speak. Now, if a person only sees the here and now, they may think this is very crucial, this is very horrendous, this is horrific. Why such a stark action? First of all, why? Because, as we just mentioned, because the person will become freed from their sinful activities and will not have to undergo suffering in sequential previous lives. And second of all, it also sends a very clear message to all others who are contemplating or thinking of maybe committing the same activity. They will desist from such type of wrongdoings. But if there is no accountability, if there is no punishment, then people say, hey, who cares? We'll get away with anything. Anything goes. And then all types of serious crimes will go on unchecked. And that is not really conducive for a civilized society. So here, this argument is happening between the Vishnudutas and the Yamadutas. And they're both right, because they're both arguing according to their level of knowledge. The Yamadutas have their level of knowledge. They're aware of the law. They know what is sin, and they know that their job is to capture sinners and bring them to Yamaraj. So are they doing their job properly? One person is nodding and the other people are kind of thinking. Hey, you're American citizens, some of you. You may be called for jury duty, you know? You may be in a situation where you have to actually, you have to give your honest appraisal of a situation. So that's what you're learning here in this classroom experience. So are the Yamadutas doing their job properly?
Yes.
Who is for yes? Raise of hands. Who is for no? Who abstains? Who is asleep? Okay, thank you for your great audience participation. So on the level of the logic of the Yamadutas, they're doing a good job because they are aware of what's going on. They know who's who. They know their usual culprits and suspects, and they were already tying Ajamil up and ready to bring him to their master. Now the Vishnudutas came and they interfered and they objected and they said, no, you can't take him. And they stopped the Yamadutas. Were they right in their logic, in their argument?
Yes.
Who thinks they were right in their argument? Who abstains? Who says they're wrong in their argument? Okay, by now everyone's awake. Thank you. So Houston, we got a problem here. They're both right. Both of these parties are right. So how to reconcile two rights without creating a wrong? Well, you have to follow the Vedic methodology, which is Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So again, there are different types of Shastras. There are certain Shastras which speak about mundane morality, the do's and don'ts of the common world. And then there are transcendental literatures who speak about the bigger perspective, the higher laws. More about that in the next chapter, because the Vishnudutas haven't yet really fully given their, fully revealed their arguments, right? They haven't yet really stated their case fully. So it is very interesting to see how scripture is building on many layers, and it is giving many different layers of arguments and many different layers of conclusions. And depending on the level of the audience and the mindset, the attitude, and the motivation of the audience, they will gravitate or they will connect to a certain frequency or to a certain level of argument. Just like if you have a person who is very attached and who is very materially engrossed, if you start speaking to them about renunciation or about transcendence, what would their result, what their reaction would be to that? Yes, the man with the hat has got a microphone.
They'll get defensive.
Please.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
They would get defensive.
I still can't hear you.
He said they would get defensive.
They will get defensive. Thank you. They will get defensive. And it's not very productive if you have people who are defensive. They're defensive because they're very attached. And what you just told them is going completely against their value structure. And I'm sure you've had experiences of that when you when you state something that people will consider offensive or it goes against their worldview and they completely reject it. They totally feel opposed, they feel threatened. They may even start attacking you because they dislike what you just said. Has this ever happened to you? Yes. So, rule of thumb, know your audience and know on what level your audience is on. Just like when Vishnu appeared as a little brahmachari and he was coming to save, who was it who gave the blessing? Lord Shiva gave blessing to Vrikasura. There was one demon who performed severe austerity by eating only one handful of ashes every day. That was his tapasya. But the Lord did not appear before him after a month of doing that. So he decided that he would perform a sacrifice, and he cut flesh off of his own body and he threw it in the fire and he offered it to Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva was very upset and disgusted by this, but he's got some interesting characters as his devotees. And after, again, quite a prolonged time, he would not appear. So Vrikasura was about to chop his own head off. At that moment, Shiva appeared and he appeased him. And he said, okay, hold your horses. What do you want? And he said, I want the blessing that whoever's head I touch, that head will crack in 1,000 pieces. As Shiva was obliged. He said, okay, tatastu. But then he took after Shiva and wanted to try out his benediction and touch his head. You see, that's what happens when you give undeserving people some benedictions. Has it ever happened to you that he gave somebody some blessing, some boon, or you gave them some favor, and that person turned around and used that favor against you? Has it ever happened to you? Yeah. Okay, so take note of that, write it down. Be careful what kind of favors you give to people, because they may use them against you. So as he was chasing after Shiva in outer space, Vishnu appeared in the form of a small brahmachari, a small child. And he said, hey, whoa, where are you going, Vrika? Why so much trouble? Why so much stress? Don't you know that the body is the source of all pleasure and enjoyment? So if you're stressing yourself out too much and you overwork, you won't be able to enjoy. So relax, take a break. And you know what? Vrikasura, this was like sweet music to his ears. This was like someone pouring honey into his ears, because he heard, yeah, the body is important and sense gratification is the goal of life. So he started paying attention. That's why sometimes when we share Krishna consciousness, we may speak something about health, we may speak something about Ayurveda, about vegetarianism, about, how to be successful and productive and how to live an enjoyable and agreeable life. And guess what? People start paying attention. And then you can introduce them to the topic of Krishna consciousness. So it's like a funnel. When you have a funnel, it's a wide rim. And you meet them wherever they are. And then you bring them closer to the essence. Just like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he had his big theistic exhibitions, and on the outskirts there was people juggling and dancing and playing tricks and all kinds of magic, and they would just attract the public, like in a big fair park, an amusement park. Have you ever been to an amusement park? If not, anyway, it's not available right now, so but you can do your homework, your research. And then as they went inside, there was dioramas with different leelas of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna and different points of the Bhagavad Gita. And inside there was Bhagavad Gita and straightforward preaching of Krishna consciousness. So it's a funnel. Also, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a daily newspaper, the Nadia Prakash in Bengali. Every day that newspaper came out, and the front page was simply mundane news. They simply copy and pasted news from all the other newspapers in that area and stuck it on their front page. But if you turn the first page, then it was on page number 2, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, and straight Krishna conscious philosophy. So you can say it's bait and switch. It's just get them hooked. But it is permissible to use all these techniques in order to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Just like if the mother tells the child, this is not medicine, this is a sweet, but she has hidden the medicine inside the sweet. Is she lying? No, she's not lying, because it is a sweet, but it also has medicine inside. So the art is to know the mindset of your audience and find a dialogue, find a strategy that is agreeable to your audience, with keeping in mind not just the external benefit, but the ultimate benefit of your audience. Just like right now, I'm talking to you in a way that you can relate. Because if I would be talking to you in German or in Russian or in French, most of you wouldn't be able to relate. So I try to speak a language that you can appreciate, and that your mind, your intellect does not feel insulted. Because if the mind or the intellect gets insulted, what happens? You disconnect, you shut off. Has this ever happened to you in class? That the speaker was going off on a rant, on some tangent, and your mind just pulled that switch and just disconnected and shut down the CPU, and you just went in internal mode, and you did not connect with what the speaker was talking about. So here, Shukadeva Goswami is presenting topics that are very relevant and relatable to all of us, because we are in the situation where sometimes we may do things that are not 100%. Has it ever happened to you? You may have done things that were not exactly according to the textbook, and then you were faced with the consequences, and you had the choice of either earning up and facing the consequence and then paying the price, or blaming others or avoiding responsibility, or ideally, which is what we're coming to here, doing something positive, something beneficial that will not only counteract the wrong, but it will actually create something beneficial, something positive, something that will actually make a difference. So this whole philosophy for an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and tit for tat is not really the greatest strategy to run a society. But unfortunately, most people are in the lower modes of nature. And when people are more animalistic, oftentimes they only respond to the stick. They also respond to the carrot. So carrot, stick, carrot, stick, carrot, stick. This strategy is being used in society. And you can see it all throughout, not just in legislation, but also in advertisement, in marketing, in social science, in politics. Have you ever noticed the stick and the carrot? Work with me, people, work with me. Yes, right? Stick and carrot. It's quite a useful strategy for dealing with lesser grade people. But if you have higher grade people who are of a different caliber, if they're faced with the option of stick and carrot, they don't really like to engage in that type of dialogue because it's not motivating to them, which shows that if you want to appeal to a higher caliber of people, you have to take on a different discourse. Their incentives are different. They are not fearful and they're not desperate. Fearful and desperate people, you can coerce them or you can bribe them. But if a person is on a more elevated state of consciousness, you have to appeal to their higher intelligence. And ultimately, the highest buy-in is love. Because love or bhakti is the ultimate motivating factor. Why are you going to school? because somebody loves you, because your parents love you, because you have teachers who love you. So love is the ultimate motivating factor. And the more we can live a life of bhakti, and the more we can imbibe this love that is being made available through this process of Krishna consciousness, the more you will be able to motivate people on a higher level. Because if you lead your life with a carrot and a stick in your hands, you will never really do tremendously meaningful and impactful things. First of all, your hands will always be tied to a stick and a carrot, and that's, you know, a very limiting type of a strategy. And second of all, you will miss out on a lot of opportunities, because there are people out there who are looking for a higher purpose. They're looking for a different sort of discussion. They're not satisfied with this kind of debates that are going on at this current moment. So when I meet people on the street, I always ask them, what's your mantra? Is it survival, or is it enlightenment? I asked them very clearly, what's your modus operandi? What gets you moving? Is it just to get by, or are you actually looking for meaning and purpose? And even though most people will say a mixture of the two, or they will say mostly survival, excuse me, they start thinking about enlightenment, and they start thinking about meaning and purpose. Because that is the goal of the human form of life. We are meant to inquire about what are our actual goals and our actual aspirations. Last time we talked about atato brahma jigyasa, that now is the time to inquire about the true nature of the self and how we can actually achieve our highest objective, and not just get by, not just not get killed, not just have a fridge full of food, because that has been done in all the other life forms, as you have noticed if you would care and pay attention to observing nature. So as the arguments unfold, we will see how there are different forces at play, and it is a very interesting dialogue on many levels. It is quite intriguing. So at this point, I'd like to open up for questions, reflections. Yes.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me all right?
Technology makes life easy. Sometimes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you so much for your class. I was wondering, I didn't catch at the beginning when you were speaking about being caught in being a neutral party when two are arguing. You said there's 3 things to know, and the first was to stop talking and to listen. The second was if you listen to the essence. The first was to not talk and to listen, and then the second you said was if you listen to the essence, even if it seems that it was inconclusive, you'll find there are some takeaways. What was the third thing, if there was one?
Yeah, there was one. The third thing, thank you, was that there's different levels of truth according to the methodology. Like the Yamadutas had their level of truth, but the Vishnudutas' level of truth was higher because they were subscribing to Sanatana Dharma, not to mundane religiosity, not just to the law book, but to the higher truth. So there can be many rights. It's not that one person has to be right and the other has to be wrong. There can be many rights, and they can be reconciled and accommodated. There is a verse that says, "Achintya kalu ye tangstarkena na yojaye," that all seeming contradictions become resolved in the inconceivable nature of the Supreme Lord. So yes, the Yamadutas were right, but the Vishnudutas were also right. And they had, as you can call it, superior firepower, because they were following the eternal Dharma, and thus they ultimately won the argument. So that's why it's not enough to just know the facts and the figures and the mundane law, but you have to actually see what is the bigger picture, what is the bigger context, and how does it relate in the realm of Krishna consciousness. Because sometimes a person may be wrong, but because we respect them, we do not want to prove them wrong, or we do not want to confront them, because it's not our position to do so. And we know that Krishna is in their heart, and that Krishna, through his agents of time and other people, will be able to reach that person and to change that person's behavior. Because sometimes you're like your students, you're young, and you see something that's not agreeable. And if every time you see something that doesn't 100% commute and you jump on it and you try to fix it, it's very difficult to move forward in life. Have you noticed? So sometimes we also have to accept that it may not be my task to rectify this person, but it may be somebody else's task to do so. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, because I'm a pretty observant person, and it's if you have a managerial brain, it's kind of a curse in this world and in this movement. So so I have to accept that it's not my task to change people or to change all the situations, but I have to know. In other words, choose your battles. Know where you can make a difference and apply yourself there. Otherwise, you might get frustrated. Yes, the man with the hat on the right-hand side.
Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you mentioned that you often ask people, what is your mantra, survival or enlightenment, right? And if they say, yeah, it's survival, but what's enlightenment? What do I get out of enlightenment? Because I know that with survival, I'll stay alive. Like, what can we say?
Well, it's just a point of entry. It's just a hook, to hook their mind and to get them thinking. And then you just involve them in a conversation. You say the same thing like I just said, that look around you. I don't think there is a lack of facility. There is enough prosperity, right? There is enough cars, there's enough buildings, there's enough food, there's enough of everything. But why are we so scared? Why are we so insecure? We got people of all the nations here at UF, and still people feel segregated and afraid of each other and scared to just say hello and look someone in the eye, How many times have you walked down the road and somebody passed you, and after they passed you, you turned around to make sure they weren't coming after you or they weren't attacking you? Has this ever happened to you? Or is it just me? And I'm not just talking New York. I'm talking sunny Florida. I'm talking Gainesville. And there's really nothing to be afraid of, right? So why are we fearful? Because we know that maybe we have taken a little more than we deserve, and now we're scared that somebody's going to come and take it away from us. So you can just communicate this in a nutshell, and you will see whether the person can resonate with it. And then if they do, you got yourself a book distributed, sir, because if people will agree and accept what you tell them, then that means they're agreeable to your philosophy. And naturally, they will want what you have. So the art is to make simple points that people can agree upon. If you ask people about cosmology or about, capital punishment or about abortion or about, this and that and the other thing, there will be a lot of contention. There will be a lot of argument. So the art is to find simple things that are agreeable and then build on that. You understand? So most people will agree that we're not just here in order to get by and to survive and to get food. Because why would you spend 60 grand a year just to learn how to do that all the other animals are already doing much better than we are, right? So there must be a higher purpose. There must be a point in this. And you can ask the kids, did you ever read those 2 plaques that are there at the entrance of your great university? You know, on 13th and University Avenue, that entrance to the UF campus, you know where I'm talking about? You know that spot? If you can ask any student, did you ever go up there and read those 2 plaques? There's some good stuff written there, okay? So in case you think this is just about survival, maybe you should go and do your homework and read what this school is all about. You're supposed to come out of this school switched on, with actually empowered to make a difference in your own life and in the world, and not just get by. But how you communicate that, that's really up to you and up to the situation. So you can do it in a very concise way. And you just have to see, you have to be observant. You have to really see, is this person with me, or am I losing my audience? So give them as much as they can. And you'll be surprised when you start talking a little bit bigger picture. Some people really open up and they feel like, wow, you know, this guy's got something. And they will start paying attention. Yes, Shruti Sagar Prabhu.
Yeah, I was appreciating your point about being relatable to people. And you mentioned Bhaktisiddhanta, and also we're reading Prabhupada's Lamrita, and how he's speaking so much in the context of World War II, because in the 40s and 50s, he's talking about it. He's talking about World War II, and then he talked about just India in general, after independence. So he talks in those terms so that people can relate to the message. And I was appreciating that Prabhupada was making a lot of points from the Bhagavatam, but the way he was presenting it, he was talking in the words of what common people back then used to talk about. So yeah, it's really crucial that when we have any kind of outreach programs or anything, it's geared towards, at least the forefront is relatable. And then of course, then we bring in the essence. I really appreciated the point. And it has to be done in such a manner that, like, people, yes, it can't be like, oh, well, we have a yoga class, and then people show up in yoga mats, but then it's like a lecture. So it can't be so abrupt either. But yeah, it's just done in a nice manner where whatever is presented is there, and also we bring in the essence of Krishna consciousness. As you were saying, like the art of doing it, how to make it relatable, and bringing in the essence of Krishna consciousness as well.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Shruti Sagar Prabhu. Very much true. I ask everybody, how are you doing right now? By the way, how are you all doing right now?
Great.
You guys okay? Yeah. So, you know, in this way, you actually get the response, because sometimes you just download, you just give your monologue, but the person is totally somewhere else. They're completely absent. So you need to connect. If you don't have a connection, your signal is not coming across. You may be in front of a person, but if you're not connecting, the signal doesn't really, you know, the message doesn't get heard. So I have many questions that I ask people, and we talked about this in the Sankirtan seminar, so we're not going to get into this at length, but I ask them how they're doing, and I also ask, how is the mind? And you'll be surprised. People will tell you stuff that they even themselves didn't know. Because that's what's happened when you catch them off guard, and they just start opening up, and they start telling you about their life, and they're surprised that actually there is a soul inside, you know, there's a person. And I ask everybody right now, are you here or are you everywhere? And that really catches them, because some say I'm here, or some say I'm everywhere, or some say both. And I tell them, you know, happiness is only right here, right now. The moment is all you have. The past is gone. The future hasn't come yet. So if you think you're that, you know, I'm everywhere kind of a person, where is your focus? And if you're only here, but you can't have perception of the bigger picture, you may also get a little bit lost. So yoga means balance, and you need to find that balance. So that's your point of entry into any type of discussion. But that means you have to be flexible and ready to meet people where they're at, and then take them on a little journey for as long as you have them. It might be a few moments, it might be a few minutes, it might be almost an hour. We got another 5 minutes, so we have time for a couple more questions or reflections. We got in the back.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. I was just wondering, in the argument that happened between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, so I feel like the Yamadutas were right because they were following, they were basically following the order of Yamaraj. But then I was thinking that Yamaraj should know better because he's a Mahajana and he's, Dura, and how is it that he was kind of oblivious to the power of chanting holy name?
Well, Yamaraj knew better. He definitely knew better because he's a Mahajan. But that also shows to you that the ground level personnel may sometimes not have all not the bigger picture, not the full wisdom, They're just following certain basic instructions, but they may not be fully in the know about the bigger picture. So Yamaraj certainly knows about the power of the holy name, and it's not like he was opposing the Vishnudutas, but let's put it that way: the Yamadutas just had a general order: bring me all people who engage in sinful activities. And this incident is very important because it shows the power and the potency of the holy name, and that's why the story came about. So even at the risk of someone calling Yamaraj ignorant, he's happy to play that role as a Mahajan in order to glorify the holy name of the Lord. So sometimes you have to admit defeat when you are proven wrong by a higher authority, even though you may be right on your level of argument and logic, but there might be a higher level of argument and logic involved. So just to explain, why did the Yamadutas deploy if their boss knew that the holy name had already purified Ajamil? To set this example, so you can say it's for the sake of Leela, for the sake of pastime, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to read about this incident in the Bhagavatam, and then there would be no 6.1 to distribute, because this would be missing. So we're grateful that this history occurred. Yes.
Harish Sharma, he's off screen, he has a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I have a reflection. In the beginning of the class, you were talking about the nature of atonement and how people go to the church, atone, and they go to the bar. And I remember a long time ago, somebody was giving a class on a similar topic, and he said that in Krishna consciousness, we atone and have fun in the same place. And karmis, they go atone in one place and have fun in a different place. So that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness, how we can, it's just such a joyful process. We don't have to go have fun somewhere else. We can just atone and have fun at the same time.
Yes, thank you for your reflection. And yeah, in some ways, sometimes, like you think, hey, I gone to the morning program, I've been a good boy, I've been a good girl, I chanted some rounds, I heard the Bhagavatam, and now I get the great relief of being allowed to check my social media and do all these exciting, brilliantly inspiring type of activities. Or in the early days, the devotees would sometimes in New York and San Francisco go out of the temple and go to the coffee shop and eat some donuts and drink some coffee, you know. Even sometimes people will come to the kirtan and then go outside and have a cigarette. And then Prabhupada had to remind them that it was not exactly the proper way of doing things. But as long as we're in the conditioned state, the mind says, okay, you've done something good. Now you can do something not so good, and it will be okay because, you know, you will balance things out, and it's perfectly permissible. But after a while, this whole idea of starting a fire and throwing water on it, it becomes a little counterproductive. It becomes a little ludicrous. So be mindful not to fall into these traps when the mind tries to push you in that corner, that, hey, I've done something great, so now I can do something that's a little questionable or a little borderline because, hey, I'm a good guy and I can get away with it. And guess what? It can work out for 9 out of 10 times, but on the 10th time, boom, something hits you and you're like, what happened? So don't push your luck, because material energy is relentless and the laws are acting and the forces of nature are very powerful, speaking from personal experience. So in other words, I humbly beg you, please do your homework in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise it will build up. And then at the most unopportune moment, it will catch up and it will bite you. And that's not such a great experience, you know, when you get hit. Like one famous boxer who was famous or infamous because he took a little bite out of someone's ear. He said that everybody has a plan till they're hit, you know? So you may all have great plans in life, and all of a sudden you get hit and you don't know what happened. And that's because we have not been really attentive. We have not been really careful. So first we have to be conscious, then we can be Krishna conscious. We're here in this experiment to develop more our consciousness, to become more aware of ourselves, of others, of the world, and of Krishna. And these are tools that are extremely valuable for your entire life. This is the actual school of life. So thank you for taking part in this laboratory experiment of Krishna House and going through this process of refinement. Don't let the mind cheat you and get into this, okay, I can atone and then I can do something that's a little questionable mindset, that game, and try to be on a steady, progressive path towards Krishna consciousness. Thank you for your kind attention. I will see you tonight at the program. Have a great day. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Vrinda ki jai. Haribo.
Haribo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, bro.